right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:41 PM. I'm calling, it's Tuesday, May 5th, 2026. I'm calling tonight's meeting of the Whately Planning Board to order. We're going to skip the approval of minutes until our next regularly scheduled meeting, where we'll do minutes from last meeting and tonight. All. We're just gonna go right into the main item on tonight's agenda. So now at saying 5:42 PM, I'm continuing or reopening the public hearing on the proposed amendments to our zoning bylaw pertaining to battery storage and to the complementary solar electric generator facilities bylaw. So what has transpired, maybe what I'll do, I'll just share this on my screen. I'll give you a sort of brief on the record recap of what's up here and what's in focus. So number one, we've now been through 2 rounds of revisions, review of our solar and battery storage bylaw amendment proposals with town council. So this latest draft, which I've been tracking it by date and also by version number. So the final version of the battery storage zoning amendment proposal is dated April 30th this year, and it's also version 12. All right. So that is the final draft. I did include, I'm sort of scrolling, we started our public hearing on April 7th. We opened the public hearing on April 7th. And at that time, we had version 9 of the battery storage bylaw dated February 2025. And we've made a couple more changes. We continued the public hearing to April 28th, but we could not actually have the public hearing on April 28th due to the conflict with the town election. So we continued the public hearing to tonight. And in that time, a few more changes got made to produce the current version, version 12, dated April 30th. So I summarized them in the top of the battery storage. Really, all the changes have been made by town council to the battery storage bylaw, right? And it's really, it's just clarifications of language, it's editorial corrections, where things needed to be capitalized that weren't capitalized, town council did that. There is really nothing, no significant changes to intent or effect of the bylaw based on what we got from town council. I would say that town council has, you might say, blessed this version to go forward to town meeting.
And at that meeting, it's the select board who will give them a recommendation.
We will, so I'll come to that.
Okay, very good, thanks.
So so we are dealing with, there are going to be two zoning related warrant articles on the town meeting warrant. The first one will be the battery storage article. And the second will be the changes to the solar bylaw for consistency with the battery storage bylaw. And it will be dealt with by the moderator that if for some reason town meeting doesn't pass the battery storage bylaw, then there won't be a discussion or vote on the solar, because
they'll do that night, or
they'll do that night.
They don't need time to review this year-long effort that you've put into this.
No, I mean, what? So. Yeah, the way this works is that we do this work, we will ultimately close the public as a matter of sort of process. We're going to very shortly close the public hearing because there's no new testimony, there's no no citizens coming to comment. I mean, no one's on Zoom. So it's just those of us here in the room. So the point of the public hearing is to allow for testimony, citizens' comments and questions, for presentation of evidence or, that may guide our decision making. That's why we have these public hearings. And I always want to remind you that terminology different than a public hearing, very formal thing versus a public meeting. All of our meetings are public meetings. Public hearings have a level of formality necessary for doing these kinds of zoning changes. Once we close the public hearing, and we will have a vote, a discussion and vote to close the public hearing. Then that signifies that we've done all the collection of information and evidence about the final draft of whatever we've been considering. Then, after the public hearing is closed, we as a board deliberate, and then we vote on whether essentially to recommend the town meeting favorable or unfavorable action on these violations.
Mike Motner just texted me that he is coming here,
Okay.
and at our last meeting, he had some comments about this, I believe.
Yes,
Agriculture,
yes.
do we need to hear his comments in the public meeting or after the public meeting is closed? Because I think it's important to listen to what he said.
Well, it constitutes relevant evidence on the matters of the water supply protection
Okay.
for agriculture.
Can he give you that, to give you an update of what he's talking about?
It doesn't matter what he did outside of a public hearing.
I don't know if he shared the information with you.
Yeah, and because it can't be used,
Okay.
right? So, and he, because we couldn't have any of the public hearing on April 28th, though he had that information and was willing to share it, we legally could not actually hear it then.
Correct. Do we need to wait for him to share?
It would be
That's
good. You think he's going to
He
get
said he
here?
was on his way, he said it was like 15 minutes out, he texted me a few minutes ago. So-
Okay, all right. So I think we will keep the public hearing open for a little bit longer. And I don't know, whether we have to, so anyway, this is my opportunity to just make sure we're all clear, and I'm gonna talk to you. Well, I guess we can do that.
Well, can I have
Yes, go
clarification
ahead.
questions?
Yes,
then?
please.
Okay, so when you were going through what you said, I just said, you did a brief review of what you transpired, what has transpired. So you
Yes.
said the final version of the zoning amendment,
For battery storage
for battery storage.
is
April-
dated April 30th,
Yeah,
and it's also version 12.
do you want me to put that
It,
is that really like important?
It's noted
Yeah.
in the,
it's noted in the document.
Okay,
And actually.
yeah, I
It
figured,
would only
yeah,
mattered if I had to release more than one version on the same date, but I didn't do that.
okay, that's what I
I was
wanted to.
I was version numbering everything, cause I'm an old IT guy. So every
Yeah.
little thing I do, I change the version number, but,
Yeah, that
I've
makes,
also never done too many changes on the same day.
yeah, okay,
So the date is good enough for the battery storage.
yeah,
And again, a little bit about terminology. It turns out the whole, I'm gonna answer all your questions.
yeah,
because
no,
we're-
that's fine.
this hearing is continued. So everything about zoning. Apparently the when we talk about, Whately has a zoning bylaw, singular. All the sections are sections of the zoning bylaw.
Yes,
This battery storage proposal will represent a new section of Whately zoning bylaw. It is not itself a zoning bylaw. So on terminologically,
okay,
fair
fair enough.
it's a zoning bylaw section.
Right, yeah, yeah.
And in fact, at the moment, it is a proposed zoning bylaw section.
Okay,
One quick question I had,
And then I'll just say, so we're all on the same page. The other article will deal with revisions to the existing zoning bylaw section pertaining to solar electric generating facilities.
yeah, and that's the
And
second,
that document has a different date. It's going on.
yeah, that's what I need,
Yes,
is all
So
that.
that
little inter-
document-
Yeah,
two,
is version 2 dated April 10th.
April 10th, and what was the title of that again?
So that is
proposed.
proposed amendments to Whately's solar bylaw section.
Okay, proposed amendments
To
to
Whately's solar bylaw section.
solar bylaw section. And that one was April what?
April 10th,
Ten.
right?
Okay,
So that we all know, we're all on the same page about who we've got to. And that we're, whatever we deliberate and vote on, that's what we're voting on.
okay,
And all we did with the amendments to the solar bylaw section was add a definition of battery storage. No, we didn't add a definition. We just modified the applicability section. Not actually, should change that.
okay, so then the final draft of the zoning amendment bylaw public hearing started on April 7th.
Yeah,
Continued the public hearing to April 28th, but
technically, we really just continued it to tonight.
tonight.
We
Well, I
had a
was
little
doing the,
waypoint on April 28th.
yeah, and then I said, but could not continue due to conflict of
Right.
election, and therefore April, yeah, and then
Yeah,
there.
May 5th is the.
Therefore,
And-
May
What
fifth
was that?
Oh, yeah.
Cinco de Mayo.
was the
Yeah.
rescheduled
Vaccines lost their mile.
date
They did.
for the public
That's
hearing.
Okay,
And you'll-
Yeah, cause I'm just kind of bulleting these
good.
public
Yeah,
hearing,
you're-
but I just wanted to make sure I got it in order. And then it said, you said town council made clarification of language editorial and no significant of intent or purpose.
Correct.
No changes,
Yeah, that's
no
right.
changes to significance.
I mean, it's not like
Significant
what town
changes.
council did was not necessary or important or useful. When
Yeah,
I said it wasn't significant,
yeah, no
but it just
significant.
basically made sure that it was, kind of legally accurate.
Yeah, town council, yeah, okay. Town council.
So what outcomes of this, yes, we vote to recommend favorably or unfavorably or no.
Position, that's right.
Position.
Yeah, yeah, for you as vice chair. That's what, that's what we ultimately do with any of these things. And so as part of the deliberation, which we can't have until after we close the public hearing. Cause you can't deliberate during a public hearing. Because it sort of opens the possibility that you haven't considered all the evidence. Like if you deliberate and vote during the public hearing and then somebody brings in new information before the public hearing is closed, then you have to.
Why can't we ask questions after the of stakeholders?
Oh, you absolutely can. But after, you mean, really,
When we're deliberating, we can't ask questions to stakeholders.
oh no, when we're deliberating, after the public hearing is closed. So once we're in the deliberation phase, we get to do whatever we want.
We can ask questions.
We can ask questions if they're, we're such, we can ask questions of each other, you can ask questions of me, cause now we're trying to decide what we want, like historically. We've had sort of a discussion around well, what do we think, favorable, unfavorable, neutral, and you sort of get a sense, and then there's a motion. And in this case, what I've done is I've drafted motion templates. And once we have a consensus on what the motion will be, I will read the motion. Which I had to research, these are things where you really want to get the wording really right for the record. All right, so we all know what's gonna happen. Yeah, there was something. You know, relevant about this. Like there was just news about, I mean, this stuff is still in the news, battery storage, right? There's this whole thing in Conway.
What are we doing with like,
What's going on, Conway? Sorry.
what are we doing with them, sorry, for the large industrial facility or commercial facility in Whately that wants to have battery storage on a large scale with PV on the roof
Yeah,
in their district? This is no, has nothing to do with that.
oh, it does. It absolutely affects it. So I'll remind you that because nobody could just put new stuff, new battery storage. You know, above 250 kilowatt hours on their property.
Not where it's a standalone facility.
Whether it's a standalone facility, doesn't matter. It's like here, we have new PV on the roof here. And town offices couldn't drop a 1 megawatt battery storage here without going through the regulatory process.
And we put solar panels on the buildings.
Right, so so remember, we have these 3 tiers. This isn't just.
I saw him pull it.
Yeah, I've got the 3 tiers here.
But
So there's no one, I mean, unless you're feeling like there's a problem with that. A share of that. That's my one. So we have scrolling down to the 3 tiers.
I just see that there's definitely be a case to be made. Probably in the next few years for a large building. I'll pick anything handle, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Where their electric bill is out of sight.
Right.
They're gonna put PV on the roof.
Yeah.
They're gonna put battery storage in. Try to
Nice.
offset it.
yeah, PV on their roof is, I think, hey, Mike,
But they're gonna be
EV.
photovoltaic panels, so we have solar.
Solar panels. Okay, very good.
yeah.
So
But I
they're
think
gonna-
rooftop solar on an industrial facility, you know, would have to get the electrical inspections for things like that, but wouldn't. I don't think there would be any.
Only up there, they could store enough power during the day.
Right.
It's a power factory thing.
Sure, however, if they wanted to drop, now again, looking at these tiers. If they wanna drop, say, a 10 megawatt battery storage system on their parcel. And they're in the industrial district, they can do that by right.
Yeah.
But they still require site plan review by us. And that gives us the opportunity to look through everything in this bylaw.
Yep.
And make sure that all the boxes are checked. We cannot. Planning boards cannot disapprove a site plan unless, you know, it's not compliant with zoning bylaws. And generally, we have no authority to not approve. And if somebody like some large commercial company came and said, we wanna put a 20 megawatt battery storage system and hook it up to our big rooftop solar. They must, no, doesn't matter where they are in town. They must come before the planning board for site plan review, assuming town meeting approves this bylaw, right? If we review it and we find that something is not consistent with this bylaw, we cannot deny site plan review, but we call the zoning enforcement officer.
Right.
And say, you know, this has to be resolved before we can finish our site plan review.
Mike, please kind of invite here because you had some comments in the last meeting.
Yes.
Agriculture that you wanted to speak.
And this is the time while we're in a public hearing.
So we've held this so you can speak.
Yeah, so it was a pretty even consensus. Nobody spoke up. How's that?
Okay,
I gave everybody a copy of what we had at the time.
yes,
I explained that it can be changed down the road. It's not set in stone.
right,
I advised them to all read through it
yes,
and to remember, that you can't just say we can't have these in town. To keep that in
Okay.
that.
Do you think that there was a desire?
No, not at all, and I explained to them that I explained to them what I got out of what JP had said, that
Good.
basically. You're never gonna be able to cover every scenario, so don't try.
Yeah.
Right,
So think of something realistic, and so our next meeting is not till June, we decided to skip May.
okay.
What about,
And they're just gonna give feedback, but, yeah, there was no,
So they're good, let me just make sure, I think I'm hearing what I'm hearing, that the AgCom has been informed of the provisions of this proposed zoning bylaw amendment
amendment.
pertaining to agricultural water supply protection.
Yep.
And they were comfortable with what's there.
Yes, and they are going to review it in detail,
Okay,
that was their homework,
okay,
and, yeah,
okay,
and we'll talk about it again in our next meeting.
okay, and so that'll be after town meeting.
Yep,
But
it may be
They
right
understand
before, but either way.
that
yeah,
if- if the AgCom feels that there is something fundamentally inadequate
Yeah.
in this bylaw, then that should be fed back through you
Yep.
to us
Yep.
for consideration in the
Yeah,
next.
if there is something that they feel very strongly about, then we will probably formally come up with a
what about if
letter.
Horse Farms want to do this? Cause that's all ag, they're exempt from. site.
What if who?
Horse Farms want to.
No.
Exempt.
Normal agricultural operations are considered exempt from site plan review.
So if they,
But this not, you don't get to put these kinds of facilities just on arbitrary pieces of land, just because.
They're not part of normal agricultural.
No.
okay,
Doesn't fit the definition.
because they didn't have the same thing before they did, because it's.
Right.
Agriculture, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which is a
they
different,
can put them up without us, they can build the buildings without us, but they need to come to us for a solar battery electric storage facility.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm just looking at this,
and I think they still have to, they still have to deal with the building inspector.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just do whatever you want, kinda can, but.
yeah,
You know, written law.
Yeah, it's. I'm assuming that project had it's a controlled bill.
Oh, absolutely.
well, I'm sorry, I was just.
North Farm.
We were just
So I
talking.
know the big building, the special
Yeah.
road building that, and that was well. That was a whole, I don't wanna get
Yeah.
derailed by that, but that was ultimately adjudicated as per the AgCom.
Yeah.
As normal agricultural operations that should be exempt from site plan review. So that's all there is.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, I suppose if. A large farming operation or Bear Path Compost said, I wanna put a 50 megawatt. Battery storage on my, for whatever reason, and I need it to help. Digest my compost or whatever, I don't
I
know.
don't think it's gonna fly.
I don't think that that would fly as normal agricultural operations. So,
Yeah, I can't think of anything that you would need that much power.
okay, very good. So, I believe that there's no more public comment. There's nobody else on Zoom. This has been a long process, so I think we've heard everything that we need to hear about this. We can, per a motion and a vote, close the public hearing. So if one of you find.
I would make a
people-
motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, motion has been made by Mike Mahar, seconded by, so we get Mike and Mike, second, so all in favor of closing the public hearing,
Aye.
all say up. So it's unanimous, all four of us, the public hearing is now closed. Now, we're in the deliberation of what to do. So as we were talking just before your arrival, Mike, that what we do as a planning board at this point is we, having gathered all the information, done all this work, we now deliberate on a motion, whether we want to recommend favorable, unfavorable, favorable action or unfavorable action, or take no position with respect to this. And I would say, now I'm gonna sort of say that I think, you know, this may not be perfect. Perfect is the enemy of the good enough. This is like 20 pages of new regulation, which is like, I have some mixed feelings about that, but you can't say that we have, there may be we've covered a lot of bases, so we pay particular attention to water supply protection. We pay particular attention to, emergency service and, fire prevention and things like that. So I think I would encourage us to, let's see if we have a consensus. Do we feel like we would make a recommend favorable action on this to town meeting? What do you people think?
I was somewhat against this from the beginning because I felt that we were putting regulations on the target and that we were just wasting our time. Doing this because the technology is going to be obsolete in 6 months and the technology next year could be much safer and allow much more flexibility and much more safety to the community. And like to say, like, we're banning this technology right now, well, next year it's gonna be different technology. So I thought we were wasting our time. After going through this project, I was moving more towards no position. The towns would decide, but I have moved more towards feeling in favor of this. Seeing as that we're still gonna allow it, but we're putting the onus on public safety aspect of it and the fire marshal and the fire chief and stuff, making sure it's gonna be safe. I just don't want to overly recognize that. I don't want to stifle technology and growth. That's what I don't want to do.
Right.
I don't want to stifle the opportunity
Right.
to help people have lower energy costs. So I am moving more towards acting favorably for this because we're not stifling it, just trying to control it a bit. But my feeling all along was just let the state figure it out. And if the experts, they know more about this than I do, and if they think it's good, then I'm acceptable with that. And that's what we're going with it now. I get the approval for them that the technology is safe, then I'm okay. So.
Well, let me just ask you, maybe remind us all of the following. That in general, the way zoning typically works, uses, like whether it's a restaurant or a car wash. The usual way zoning works is that if you don't explicitly allow a use in town or in a zoning district, then if it's not mentioned in the table of use regulations, then that is implicitly a prohibition. So it's an opt-in versus opt-out. If you want something in town, you have to explicitly include it. And then if you want to put more regulation around it, you can create sections. Like, there are a lot of uses listed in our table of use regulations that have no details anywhere else. You just basically say, a car wash is not allowed anywhere. An adult facility is not allowed anywhere except grandfathered in a particular location, right? But restaurants are allowed here by special permit, but not there, right? But clean energy facilities, because of a particular part of the zoning act, something called the Dover Amendment. The Dover Amendment is I forget whether it's chapter 48, section 3 or 9, but basically it says cities and towns may not unreasonably regulate clean energy facilities, including solar. And what that means is, the way that's been interpreted operationally, is that when you do not include solar or battery in you don't explicitly allow it, because of the Dover Amendment, that no longer behaves as a prohibition. It simply means that now you're effectively allowing it everywhere with no regulation or oversight.
That's why I'm moving more towards supporting this proposal.
Yeah, and it could be that this nearly 20 pages of regulation is overachieving or a howitzer to kill a mosquito or whatever. I'll again remind you that 80–90% or more of this is based on a model bylaw promulgated by the state. I mean, this was not created out of whole cloth. So part of the choice and part of what we would say, or I would say in front of town meeting, is that there's a choice to be made, like if you don't approve this, then you're basically saying battery storage can go anywhere in town with basically an electrical permit and a building permit and end of story. And if one gets built right next to you, you basically have no say in anything, whether it's screened, whether it makes noise, what. And most residents might say, wait a second, maybe. Hey, so that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yep.
So I think that's a choice that could drive our recommendation. Either saying we don't think it's in the town's best interest to have an absence of regulation. And we think that, this is our best effort to do this. And if people feel, I mean, if there was a consensus at town meeting that there's too much regulation here, we'd rather have none than this amount. I guess that would come
That's
out
not
at
gonna
town meeting, probably not.
No.
Given.
So yeah, so my mind has been changed over the course of all this stuff. I do.
Good. I guess you're the next longest serving member.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you that in the beginning, I thought. It seems like it's gonna change so fast. I think it's a great foundation that. You have mostly put together,
We can
So,
also change things through.
yeah, and I think,
We can tweak them
um,
down north.
yeah, the more I learned about it, like a gigawatt, a megawatt, all those things
Yeah.
aren't gonna change.
Yes,
So I do think even with the technology changing. Again, it's a great foundation, and I think it's something to build, you can, yeah,
and I do believe that battery chemistries are going to change.
of course.
Nobody wants to.
Well, everything's gonna change eventually, so. Yeah,
It's the only constant life.
yeah, death and taxes.
We had nickel cadmium batteries when we started working, and now we have lithium ion batteries.
Right.
Unbelievable difference.
Yeah, I bet. I was very concerned about wells and water contamination and I'm new to the board, so I did do a little research on that and, the accessory board doesn't know where these wells are, and I actually sent an email out to our health inspector. And every time a well is, you have to have a permit for a well.
Yeah.
But still, the bottom line is, I think we're not gonna be able to tell us, we're just not gonna figure out where all these wells are. So we're gonna put it on the owner to say, okay, you have to discover this. And that's our only remedy, I think. So given that, and my gut tells me, I'm not sure if that system's coming to town anytime soon. But I wouldn't imagine taking an unfavorable or no position on all this work. It was well intended.
No pun intended.
Yeah, I think too, like if a homeowner with a well. Knows there's a facility, they're going to know there's a facility, and if they're concerned, everyone's concerned. They're gonna know,
They're gonna say something.
they're not gonna hide where their well is.
They're not.
There has to be some responsibility on the people who are gonna live.
And I'm good with it. I'm just.
Yeah. I think it's,
I was bothered that the town doesn't know where all our wells are, but then again, it goes back
Yeah.
forever, right? Did they pull a
Right.
permit on 1812 house for a well? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, I did send them this picture of where we drilled our well, but now that I think about it, no one came out and checked. I put a stake in the ground with a little flag,
Yeah.
and that's where Henshaw backed up to and drilled, and
So that data is not available to us. But the next best scenario is what we've done, I think.
and I think we've done a good job
Oh, for
with
sure.
the whole butter notification, like.
Right.
Trying to make it clear that, there's this 500 foot. A butter's within 500 feet of, you draw the perimeter of the site footprint. Go 500 feet around, no, and all those butters have to get notification by mail.
Right.
And that notification has to ask them to share
Yeah.
information about the location of their wells. But it doesn't, it not only does it not, it cannot require them to do so. But the onus is on these abutters to, they
Speak up.
must get notified. They have the opportunity to provide this information, but they cannot block a project simply by refusing to provide it.
But given that, and given that I'm new, I would take a favorable position. Wow.
Newness, I think is, you're, but again, I think, you've been through enough of this. Yeah, you're a little bit late to this particular party, given that we started this,
Here we go.
the history was that, I'm not gonna talk about it. It's just, I'm so, this has been consuming so much, this has been living inside my head for, long enough.
As long as I've been on the board. It's been almost a year.
Oh,
Be a year.
Yeah,
June or July.
well, the Citizens Committee, the Energy Storage System Study Committee was formed
Before,
like in the end of 2024.
yeah.
And then it was like around March, April of 2025, where it landed here,
Yeah.
and we've been working on it ever since. Okay,
So
so,
I'm favorable.
so we have the consensus of what the motion will be. So now I'm going to make the motion. And then one of you fine people can second this motion, and we will have a vote. We're gonna have two motions, one for each of these two. Right. So I'm gonna, and I can send you the wording actually. Because I've written this down.
Okay, good.
So. I move that the planning board recommend favorable action by town meeting on the warrant article to amend the Whately zoning bylaw by adding a new section governing battery energy storage systems as set forth in the warrant article and as presented at the public hearing. That's the motion.
I second that motion.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded. And it's clear that we're talking about the April 30th version of the section pertaining to battery energy storage systems, which I also call version 12. You all understand? Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, raise your hand and say
Aye.
aye. Passes unanimously. Next motion. I move that the planning board recommend favorable action by town meeting on the warrant article to amend the existing solar energy provisions of the Whately zoning bylaw as set forth in the warrant article and as presented at the public hearing. So those are yes, so we're talking about the April 10th draft of the revisions to the existing solar energy provisions. And I also call version 2. So that's the motion.
Second.
Mike Mahara seconding that motion. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So now the next thing that has to happen. I propose to do. So I'm going to propose that this board. Because let me back up a second. So having done what we've done, now we have 21 days. Not gonna take that long, to deliver a report to the select board with our recommendations, what we just voted. And anything else that we want to share about our reasoning or. So. What I'm going to. We have a choice. I'm going to recommend that you all vote, that we have a vote where you all authorize me as chair to draft and sign that report on your behalf, consistent with the recommendations just voted. Then it, as a result, if we do that, it just becomes an administrative document
Right.
that's executed under your delegated authority to me, and it's not a deliberative product. Like, if, as an alternative, just so you know, we're talking, the alternative, is we cannot deliberate outside of a public meeting, right? So, for example, I can draft this report and circulate it to all of you, that's okay, one-way communication is perfectly fine by open meeting law. The problem would be if you started replying to me
Right.
or even replying to each other. Now we're suddenly deliberating outside of a public meeting. So that's not kosher. If you wanted to have a say in this report or have a chance to review it or whatever, provide feedback, then we would have to agree to have another meeting, another public meeting to basically discuss and vote on approval of this document. That's the only, and of course, we could do that on May 28th, the end of, which is May 26th, which is normally when we would have our regularly scheduled planning meeting. We could do that, but I would actually like to not have that, because I'm going to be in the Berkshires. But I would make a special Zoom for you to do if you wanted that. So how do you guys feel about trusting me?
We've trusted you this far, yeah. I would make the motion to delegate authority to Brant.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded to delegate authority for writing the planning board's report to the select board.
Yeah.
To me as chair.
So hold on, Mike Meyer made a motion to delegate Brant authority.
To draft and submit the planning board's final report on the public hearing.
Okay, report on the public hearing.
That's really what you
Yeah.
meant to say, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you seconded that, JD,
Oh.
and that was the motion you thought you were second.
Second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded and reported by our trustee. Assistant, all in favor of that motion, say aye. All right, passes unanimously. Then. Let's just talk a little bit about, so we are agreed that we are not going to meet on May 26th. So you can take that meeting date off your calendar. Please, if you want some entertainment, come to town meeting on June 2nd. I, of course, have to be there, and for you to know, JD, if you're ever in this sort of role, you're expected, you would be expected as chair to attend. But I'm usually called
the
off.
finance committee,
Oh, that's-
finance with the chair and vice chair.
Now, our next regularly scheduled meeting will then be on the 30th of June. And I would like,
I will not be here.
you will not be
No,
here for that
I'm gonna
one.
be on vacation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I think we would have a quorum on June 30th. And. Even well, at least we have at least three, we don't know yet about Laura's situation. And that would be the last day for several of us with expiring terms.
Is your term up? Then. Do we have to reorg? For chairmanship of them, because your term is starting a new term, because usually we do it the first week
Could
of
do that.
January, just because you're starting.
Well, I'm still. It wouldn't be meaningful on June 30th when I'm still valid, but in
First one in
July,
July.
yeah.
I'm fine waiting until January, some year, I will assume. You'll be appointed and everything, but if
Depends on the will of the board, right? You know?
So I think.
Okay, so that would be our next meeting, and I will be circulating to all of you by email a document that we will then be having discussion starting in June and then maybe finishing in July. About board priorities for over the next year. What do we need to work on? Okay, but I think then it is 6:26 and we could hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Seconded.
Motion to adjourn has been made by JD, seconded by Michael Hurl in favor of adjourning. It passes unanimously.